The year is 96 AD, and the morning sun is streaming through the compluvium of a villa on the outskirts of Rome, casting sharp, geometric shadows across a floor of polished marble that is cold enough to burn the soles of your feet. You are standing in the atrium, and the air smells of beeswax, roasted meat, and the cloying, heavy scent of lilies used to mask the underlying odor of the city's drains. It is a beautiful scene, a tableau of civilized wealth. But if you look closer, past the elegant columns and the frescoes of dancing fauns, you will see a 13-year-old boy named Marcus standing perfectly still near a fountain. He is wearing a tunic of bleached white wool that scratches against his skin, and his hair has been oiled until it gleams like obsidian. He is trembling, not from the cold, but from a frequency of fear so high it doesn't register as shaking, but as a vibration in the bones. Today feels different. The household slaves, usually noisy and chaotic, are moving with the hushed efficiency of undertakers. They avoid Marcus's eyes. They know what is happening. 3 days ago, a scribe sat at a cedar table in this very room and wrote Marcus's name on a piece of papyrus, placing it into a silver bowl alongside a sum of numbers that would feed a family for a year. Marcus does not know the specific mathematics of his existence, but he knows the feeling of being inventory. He touches his belt, his fingers grazing the rough texture of a small wooden horse hidden within the folds of his tunic. It is a crude object, carved from olive wood by a father he hasn't seen in 2 years, a father who sold him to pay a debt that was likely manufactured by the very man who now owns him. That horse is the only thing in this marble cage that is real. It is his anchor to a time when he was a son, not a unit of currency. If you think you know ancient Rome, you likely imagine the Senate, the legions, the grandeur of the Colosseum. But civilization is just a thin layer of ice over a deep ocean of chaos, and Rome was an empire built on a foundation of human fuel. We look back at the statues and see dignity, but we miss the reality that for conservative estimates of over 800,000 young men, Rome was not a glory, it was a mouth that consumed youth, beauty, and innocence with industrial efficiency. Marcus is not a victim of random cruelty. He is a product in a supply chain that stretched from the fog of Britain to the sands of Egypt. He is a renewable resource for an elite class that has grown bored with standard pleasures and has built a legal system to protect their darkest appetites. The first sign that the world is about to end comes not with a shout, but with the soft slap of leather sandals on stone. Gaius Aurelius, the master of the house, enters the atrium. He is a man who smells of expensive oil and old wine, a man whose public reputation is one of virtue and civic duty. Usually he communicates through a steward, maintaining the proper distance between owner and property. But today, he walks directly to Marcus. He circles the boy slowly, like a merchant examining a piece of pottery for hairline cracks. There is no anger in his eyes, which makes it worse. There is only calculation. He reaches out a hand that is soft, manicured, the hand of a man who has never held a plow, and lifts Marcus's chin. He checks the teeth. He runs his fingers through the oiled hair. He pulls back the tunic to inspect the shoulders and the chest. It is a clinical, sterile violation. It is the inspection of livestock. From the entrance, the sound of voices drifts in. The visitors have arrived. They are not here for politics. They are not here for philosophy. They are here to inspect their purchase. Marcus watches from the periphery as 3 men in senatorial stripes enter the reception room. They are laughing, a low, guttural sound that echoes off the stone walls. They are the consortium, a group of wealthy citizens who pool their resources to acquire the most expensive, most exotic specimens for a private facility outside the city. They do not look like monsters. They look like fathers, like uncles, like the men who sit in the front rows of the theater. This is the banality of evil in its purest form. They are discussing the price of a human soul with the same casual tone they would use to discuss the price of grain from Sicily. Marcus is summoned. He walks into the room, his legs feeling heavy, as if the gravity in the villa has suddenly increased. The conversation stops. 6 eyes fix upon him. They are dissecting him. They are evaluating his potential for endurance, his aesthetic value, his capacity to be broken without losing his marketability. One of the men, a heavy-set senator with rings on every finger, gestures for Marcus to turn. He does. He spins slowly, a white speck in a room of colorful togas. He hears them discussing his provenance, debating whether his Celtic blood will make him too defiant, or if it will add a pleasurable spice to his submission. They talk about him as if he is not in the room, as if he is a piece of furniture that breathes. And then, the negotiation ends. A pouch of gold is placed on the table. The sound of the metal hitting the wood is a heavy, hollow thud that signals the final transfer of ownership. In the eyes of Roman law, Marcus has just ceased to be a person connected to this household and has become a movable object belonging to the consortium. But the transaction is not complete. There is a ritual to perform. Gaius Aurelius nods to a guard, who steps forward and roughly searches Marcus. The guard's hands are quick and brutal. He finds the lump in the tunic. He pulls out the wooden horse. The room goes silent. The small carved toy looks pathetic in the guard's large fist. It is a piece of trash to them, a splinter of wood. But to Marcus, it is his name. It is his history. It is the promise that he existed before this moment. Gaius takes the horse. He looks at it with a sneer of disgust, not because it is dangerous, but because it represents a connection to a life that Marcus is no longer allowed to have. To be a perfect concubine, one must have no past, no memory, no self. One must be a blank slate for the master's desires. Gaius walks to the brazier burning in the corner of the room. The coals are glowing with a deep, demonic red. He holds the horse over the heat. Marcus wants to scream. He wants to run forward and snatch it back, but the suffocating weight of the system holds him in place. He knows with a terrified clarity that if he moves, he will be beaten until he cannot stand. So he watches. He watches as the dry olive wood catches fire. He watches the legs of the horse turn black and curl. He smells the smoke, a sharp, acrid scent that cuts through the lilies and the beeswax. It is the smell of his childhood burning. It is the smell of his father's hands turning into ash. When the toy is nothing but dust, Gaius brushes his hands clean and nods to the new owners. He's ready, he says. He is clean. Marcus is led out of the villa, not through the front gate, but through the service entrance. A covered wagon waits in the alleyway, its interior dark and smelling of old straw and unwashed bodies. There are other boys inside, their eyes wide and gleaming in the shadows, reflecting the same terror that is rising in Marcus's throat. He climbs in. The door is barred from the outside. As the wagon lurches forward, the wheels grinding against the cobblestones, Marcus realizes that the burning of the horse was not the end. It was the preparation. He is leaving the world of sunlight and marble atriums. He is heading toward a place where the sun does not reach, a facility built by the consortium designed to strip away everything the fire missed. The journey has begun, and the destination is a place that history tried to forget. But the bones in the ground will never allow us to ignore. The silence in the wagon is deafening, heavy with the knowledge that for boys like Marcus, the Roman Empire is not a civilization. It is a slaughterhouse with better architecture. The wagon jolts to a halt, the iron-rimmed wheels grinding into gravel that sounds different from the city streets. Finer, sharper, the sound of a driveway maintained with obsessive precision. For hours, Marcus has sat in the suffocating darkness of the covered cart, listening to the breathing of the other boys, a rhythm of terrified anticipation that fills the small space like a physical pressure. The air has changed. The stench of Rome, the open sewers, the garlic, the unwashed masses has vanished, replaced by the scent of pine, sea salt, and the sweet, cloying fragrance of jasmine. It is a smell that promises paradise, but to the boys huddled in the dark, it smells like a trap. The heavy bolt on the exterior of the wagon slides back with a metallic screech that echoes in the marrow of their bones, and the doors swing open. Light floods in, blinding and white. Hands reach in, strong, impersonal hands that grab ankles and wrists, pulling the cargo out into the open air. Marcus stumbles, his legs numb from the journey, and falls onto white gravel. When his eyes adjust, he finds himself not in a dungeon, but in a place of breathtaking beauty. They are in the courtyard of a sprawling estate, surrounded by high walls draped in ivy that conveniently obscures the iron spikes lining the top. Fountains bubble with crystal clear water. Statues of Apollo and Ganymede line the walkways, their marble faces frozen in expressions of eternal, passive beauty. It looks like a sanctuary. It looks like the Elysian Fields. But if you look closer, you see the guards standing in the shadows of the colonnades, their weapons hidden but ready. You see that the windows on the upper floors are fitted with decorative bronze grills that are, in function, prison bars. This is the facility. It is a factory of pleasure, disguised as a palace, a place where the raw material of youth is processed, refined, and consumed by the empire's elite. Marcus and the others are stripped naked immediately. This is the first step of the intake protocol, a ritual designed to strip away the last remnants of their former identities. They are washed, not with the rough soap of the city, but with expensive oils and scented water, scrubbed by silent attendants who treat them with the detached efficiency of grooms tending to prize horses. There is no cruelty in the washing, and that is what makes it terrifying. It is industrial. They are being prepared for the shelf. A man walks down the line of shivering boys. He is the lanista of this strange gladiator school, though there will be no swords here, only silk and submission. He holds a scroll, checking off descriptions against the flesh in front of him. He stops at Marcus, lifts his chin, checks his teeth, and nods. He makes a mark on the papyrus. Marcus has been received. He is now inventory. They are led to their quarters. Again, the expectation of a squalid cell is subverted by the psychological horror of luxury. The room is spacious, the floors covered in mosaics depicting scenes of revelry. The bed is soft, draped in dyed wool. There is a bowl of fruit on the table, but there is no handle on the inside of the door. The walls are thick stone. This is the gilded cage, a psychological torture technique that the Romans perfected centuries before modern behaviorists gave it a name. By surrounding the victim with comfort, the captors create a sense of debt and confusion. How can you rebel when you are fed grapes? How can you scream when you sleep on down feathers? The luxury is a muzzle. It teaches the boys that their physical comfort is entirely dependent on their compliance. Resistance means the loss of the soft bed. Submission means survival. The training begins the next morning, and it is here that the true nature of the industrialized vice reveals itself. The consortium does not just sell bodies, they sell an experience. A concubine in this stratum of society must be more than just a victim. He must be a companion, a muse, a piece of living art. Marcus is assigned tutors. He is taught to play the lyre, his fingers blistered and then healed until they are calloused enough to pluck the strings without faltering. He is taught to recite Greek poetry, memorizing the verses of Sappho and Anacreon, lines about love and desire that taste like ash in his mouth. He is taught to speak with the refined accent of the aristocracy, erasing the rougher cadence of his provincial childhood. This curriculum is not for his benefit. It is to increase his market value. A boy who can quote Homer while pouring wine commands a higher price than a mute servant. The system is investing in him, and like any investment, it expects a return. But the most insidious part of the training is not the music or the poetry. It is the silence. Marcus is taught when to speak, and more importantly, when to vanish while remaining in the room. He is taught to read the moods of men he has never met, to anticipate desires before they are spoken, to become a mirror that reflects only what the master wants to see. He is being hollowed out. The boy who carved a wooden horse is being scraped away, layer by layer, replaced by a construct named Marcus the concubine, a creature who smiles when ordered and laughs when expected. He meets the other boys in the facility during the carefully monitored communal meals. They are a gallery of broken things. There is the Greek boy, who arrived months before Marcus. He moves with a fluid, liquid grace, his eyes permanently downcast, his spirit so thoroughly crushed that he anticipates the guard's orders before they are given. There is the Germanic youth, once fierce and blue-eyed, who now sits in the corner, rocking slightly, mumbling verses of poetry to himself like a madness mantra. These are the ghosts of Marcus's future. They serve as both warnings and instructions. They whisper to him in the dark, telling him the rules of survival. Don't look them in the eye. Don't flinch. Don't remember who you were. To remember is to invite pain. The physical transformation is relentless. The diet is strictly controlled. Lean meats, vegetables, no bread that would cause bloating. The body must be kept in a state of suspended adolescence. Medical instruments found in the excavations of similar villas suggest that surgical modifications were not uncommon. Without the mercy of anesthesia, boys were subjected to procedures designed to delay puberty, to maintain the smooth skin and high voice that the clients fetishized. Whether Marcus faces the knife or merely the chemical alteration of diet and herbs, the intent is the same: to freeze time, to trap him in the body of a child while his mind ages under the weight of his trauma. He is forced to act out a parody of youth for men who fear their own mortality. Weeks turn into months. The wooden horse is a pile of ash in a distant memory. Marcus learns to dissociate. This is the survivor comfort mechanism failing and the brain's emergency defenses taking over. When the tutors touch him to correct his posture, he learns to leave his body. He floats up to the ceiling, looking down at the boy in the white tunic. It is not happening to him, it is happening to the object. This psychological splitting is the only way to endure the indignity of the inspections that occur with increasing frequency. Buyers come and go, men of the Senate, generals returning from the frontier, wealthy merchants. They walk through the facility like patrons in a gallery, discussing the boy's attributes within earshot. Good lines, they say. A bit sullen, but that can be broken. How are his teeth? They talk about Marcus as if he is furniture. And in a legal sense, he is. Then comes the day of the first true test. The lanista comes to Marcus's room not with a tutor, but with a new tunic, silk, dyed a deep imperial purple. He is told that he has been selected. A special client is coming, a man of immense importance. Marcus is bathed, oiled, and perfumed until he smells like a walking garden. He is given a cup of wine laced with poppy, a sedative to dull the panic, to ensure his hands do not shake when he pours the wine. He is led to the main reception hall, a room of staggering opulence where the walls are painted with scenes of mythological abductions. Ganymede snatched by the eagle, Europa carried off by the bull. The art on the walls mocks the reality of the room. It glorifies the very crime being committed. The client arrives. It is Lucius Cornelius, a senator whose name is carved into the stone of public buildings in Rome, a man known for his speeches on virtue and the sanctity of the Roman family. He enters not as a monster, but as a bored, wealthy man looking for a distraction. He circles Marcus just as Gaius Aurelius did, but with a familiarity that is more terrifying. He does not ask Marcus his name. He does not ask where he is from. He asks him to play the lyre. Marcus plays. His fingers find the strings, the music filling the room, a sad, hollow melody. Lucius listens, sipping wine, his eyes fixed on the boy with a look of predatory appreciation. "Turn around," Lucius says. The voice is calm, authoritative. Marcus turns. "Smile." Marcus smiles. It is a reflex now, a muscle memory disconnected from emotion. Lucius nods to the lanista. He is ready. I will take him for the weekend. The transaction is agreed upon. Marcus is not being sold this time. He is being rented. He is a library book to be checked out, read, and returned, perhaps with a few pages torn or the spine broken. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. There is no end to this. Being sold was a singular event. This rental, this passing from hand to hand is a cycle. He will be used by Lucius, then returned, then used by another, and another, until he is too old, too broken, or too dead to be of value. The hope before doom that perhaps he would find a kind master is extinguished. There is no master. There is only the consortium and the endless line of men waiting to consume him. As Lucius leads him out of the hall toward a waiting litter, Marcus looks back at the beautiful, terrible villa. He sees the other boys watching from the shadows of the colonnade. Their eyes are empty. They are witnessing his descent into the underworld, knowing their turn is coming. The gilded cage has opened, not to release him, but to feed him to the wolf. And as he steps into the senator's litter, the scent of jasmine from the garden seems to rot in his nose, replaced by the copper tang of his own terror. He is 13 years old, and his life is over. The only thing left is the endurance of the body and the slow, silent screaming of the mind. The sun sets over the Italian hills, painting the sky in the colors of a bruise, and the long night of the concubine begins. The litter sways with a rhythmic, nauseating motion as it moves through the labyrinthine streets of Rome. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of lavender and old sweat, a cloying perfume used to mask the reality of the city outside the velvet curtains. Marcus sits across from Senator Lucius Cornelius, his knees pressed together, his hands folded in his lap as he has been trained. He does not look out the window. He does not look at the senator. He looks at the floor of the litter, counting the threads in the expensive rug, trying to anchor his mind to a single, tangible reality, while the world he knows dissolves around him. The journey takes less than an hour, but it spans a distance that cannot be measured in miles. It is the distance between personhood and property, between a life with a future and an existence defined solely by the appetites of another man. When the litter finally halts and the curtains are pulled back, Marcus steps out into the courtyard of a private urban villa. It is a place of staggering architectural beauty, a testament to the wealth that flows into Rome from the bleeding edges of the empire. There are frescoes of garden scenes that trick the eye, making the walls disappear into verdant illusions. There are statues of ancestors, stern men in togas who look down with stone eyes that seem to judge everything except the man who now leads a 13-year-old boy into his private chambers. This is the great hypocrisy of the Roman elite, the cognitive dissonance that allows a man to stand in the Senate and declaim on the virtues of the Republic in the morning, and then return home to consume a child in the evening. The architecture itself is complicit. The layout of the Roman house with its public atrium and its private cubicula is designed to segregate the performance of virtue from the practice of vice. Lucius leads him to a room at the back of the peristyle garden. It is small, intimate, and decorated with explicit mosaics that would be shocking in a public space, but are standard decor here. This is the cubiculum, the bedroom, but for Marcus, it is an operating theater where his soul will be excised. The door closes. The sound of the latch clicking shut is a punctuation mark at the end of his childhood. Lucius does not beat him. He does not shout. He is terrifyingly gentle. He pours wine. He asks Marcus to recite the poetry he learned in the facility. He wants the performance. He wants the illusion that this is a relationship, a mentorship, a connection between an admirer of beauty and beauty itself. He wants Marcus to be a willing participant in his own erasure, and Marcus complies. The conditioning holds. He recites the verses of Anacreon, his voice steady, his Latin flawless. He smiles when the senator laughs. He pours the wine without spilling a drop. But inside, the dissociation that began in the wagon has become a chasm. Marcus is not in the room. He is floating somewhere above the ceiling tiles, looking down at the small figure in the purple tunic. He watches the boy move like a marionette. He feels a distant, dull sense of pity for the puppet, but no connection. This psychological amputation is the only survival mechanism available to him. If he stayed in his body, if he allowed himself to feel the touch of the senator's hand on his shoulder, the shame would stop his heart. So he leaves. He vacates the premises of his own flesh. The night passes in a blur of fragmented images and sensations that the mind refuses to catalog in chronological order. The smell of oil, the roughness of a beard, the weight of a body, the silence of the garden outside. When morning comes, Marcus is dressed and waiting by the door before the sun has fully risen. He is clean. He is ready to be returned. Lucius is already awake, dictating letters to a secretary in the atrium. Once again, the busy statesman, the pillar of Rome. He nods to Marcus as he passes, a casual, dismissive gesture. There is no goodbye. You do not say goodbye to a rental car, you simply return the keys. A servant hands Marcus a small pouch of coins, not for him, never for him, but for the lanista back at the facility. It is the rental fee. Marcus holds it. The metal is cold and heavy. It is the price of his night. He walks out to the waiting wagon, the same nondescript transport that brought him here, and climbs inside. He is returned to the facility, checked back into inventory, and sent to his room to recover. The other boys look at him when he enters the dining hall later that day. They do not ask what happened. They know. They look at his eyes, checking for the 1,000-yard stare, the hollowness that marks a boy who has crossed the threshold. They see it. Marcus is one of them now. He has been used. This cycle repeats, not once, but dozens of times. Marcus becomes a favorite of the consortium's clientele. He is rented to generals who smell of campfires and horse leather. He is rented to merchants who smell of spices and desperation. He is rented to a poet who spends the entire night weeping and holding Marcus's hand, using the boy as an emotional sponge for his own existential dread. Each client takes a piece of him. Each encounter scrapes away a little more of the personality that used to be Marcus. The boy who loved wooden horses and sunlight is gone, replaced by a vessel that can be filled with whatever fantasy the buyer desires. He becomes a mirror. He reflects their lust, their loneliness, their cruelty, and their power back at them while he remains empty. But to understand the true horror of Marcus's fate, we must zoom out. We must look away from the individual tragedy and look at the map of the empire. Marcus is not an anomaly. He is a statistic. Conservative estimates by modern historians suggest that over the course of the empire's history, more than 800,000 young men passed through this system. 800,000. That is not a cottage industry. That is a demographic shift. It is a machine that required a constant intake of fuel. The supply line stretched to the edges of the known world. In the slave markets of Delos, tens of thousands of people were traded in a single day. The Time detective looks at the shipping manifest and sees the codes. Pueri delicati, delicate boys. Exotici, exotics. These were the premium products. Raiders in Britannia targeted coastal villages not for gold, but for flaxen-haired children. Legions in Germania were accompanied by slave traders who bought captives directly from the battlefield commanders. The economy of Rome was addicted to this flesh. The taxes levied on the sale of concubines funded the building of aqueducts. The profits from the brothels and the rental facilities paved the Appian Way. The very infrastructure of civilization was mortared with the suffering of children, and the law protected it. This is the belief buster that shatters our romanticized view of Roman justice. We think of Roman law as the foundation of modern jurisprudence, a system of rights and order. But for Marcus, the law is a cage. Under the Lex Aquilia, if someone harmed a slave, the owner could sue for damages, not because the slave was a person who had been hurt, but because the owner's property had been devalued. If a client broke Marcus's arm, the lanista would sue for the lost rental income. Marcus had no standing. He could not testify. He could not accuse. He was, in the legal Latin term, res, a thing, a speaking tool. The system was not broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. It was designed to protect the property rights of the powerful against the humanity of the powerless. As the months turn into a year, Marcus begins to notice the subtle changes in his own body. He is 14 now. He is growing. His shoulders are broadening. His voice is deepening. To a normal boy, these are signs of manhood, of strength. To a concubine, they are the symptoms of a terminal disease. He is aging out of his value. The clients who pay the highest premiums want the aesthetic of the eternal boy, the Ganymede who never grows up. A man is of no use to them in this capacity. The lanista notices too. The inspections become more critical. There are discussions about diet, about restricting food to stunt growth. And then the whispers begin about the surgical solution, castration. It was illegal for Roman citizens, but the law was a porous sieve when it came to slaves. It was a common practice to preserve the youthful appearance of high-value concubines, to stop the clock of biology with a knife. The procedure was dangerous, often fatal in an age before antibiotics, but the risk was calculated against the potential profit of extending a boy's career by 5 or 10 years. Marcus hears the stories of boys who went into the infirmary and never came out, or came out changed, smooth, soft, and permanently broken. He lives in the shadow of this threat. Every meal is a calculation of survival. Every inspection is a trial. The hope before doom flickers and dies. He realizes that there is no graduation from this school. There is only the slide down the hierarchy. When he is too old for the senator, he will be sold to the merchant. When he is too old for the merchant, he will be sold to the street brothel. When he is too broken for the brothel, he will be sent to the mines or the fields, where the average life expectancy is measured in months. The wooden horse was burned, but Marcus is being consumed by a slower fire. One night, a new boy arrives. He is young, perhaps 10, with the same terrified eyes Marcus had a year ago. He is Celtic, with hair like spun gold. Marcus watches him from across the dormitory. He sees the boy trembling. He sees him reach for a hidden pocket in his tunic, checking for a token of home that the guards have not yet found. And for the first time in a year, Marcus feels something break through the dissociation. He feels a stab of recognition. He wants to go to the boy. He wants to warn him. He wants to tell him to hide the token, to stop crying, to build a wall of ice around his heart. But he does not move. He stays on his bed, staring at the ceiling, because the system has done its work. It has severed the connection between victims. To help the boy would be to acknowledge the reality of their situation, and Marcus cannot afford reality. He needs the numbness. He needs the silence. This is the bystander effect internalized. He watches the new victim enter the grinder, and he does nothing because he is just another cog in the machine. He turns over and faces the wall, closing his ears to the sound of the new boy's weeping. The facility operates with the hum of a well-oiled engine. The ledgers are updated. The gold is counted. The boys are washed and prepped. Outside, the empire is reaching its zenith. Trajan is expanding the borders. The Forum is bustling with the business of the world. Poets are writing odes to the glory of Rome. But here, in the gilded cage, the only history being written is on the bodies of the forgotten. Marcus closes his eyes and tries to summon the image of his father's face, but it is blurry now, like a reflection in disturbed water. The only face he sees clearly is the face of the senator, smiling as he pours the wine. The monster has displaced the father, and the long, slow slide into oblivion continues, one rental at a time. The boy is dead. Long live the inventory. The mirror is made of polished bronze, and it does not lie. It reflects the face of a young man who is 17 years old, but the eyes looking back are ancient, filled with a glacial fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. Marcus stands in his quarters, tracing the line of his jaw. There is a shadow there now, the faint, dark stipple of a beard that must be shaved twice a day to maintain the illusion of perpetual childhood. To a free Roman citizen, this stubble would be a sign of virility, a badge of entering the world of men. To Marcus, it is the first symptom of a terminal condition. It is the mark of obsolescence. In the economy of the flesh, aging is a crime punishable by disposal. The facility has changed around him. The boys he arrived with are gone. The Greek youth who quoted Homer took a knife from the kitchen 3 years ago and opened his own throat in the silence of the night, choosing the final exit over another session. The Germanic boy simply stopped eating, wasting away until he was too frail to be rented and was removed to the infirmary, never to be seen again. Marcus is a survivor, a veteran of the trade, but his survival has come at the cost of his soul. He has become a master of the performance, a creature who can simulate desire, joy, and submission with the precision of an actor stepping onto a stage. But the audience is getting bored. The lanista calls him in. There is no wine this time, no pretense of luxury. The meeting is brief and transactional. Marcus has been downgraded. The elite clients, the senators, and the poets, they want the fresh arrivals, the boys with skin like unblemished milk. Marcus is now second-tier inventory. He is being transferred. The gilded cage is opening, not to release him into the wild, but to drop him into the pit. He is sold to a lupanar, a brothel in the Subura, the notorious slum district of Rome. If the facility outside the city was a factory disguised as a palace, the Subura is a factory that has abandoned all disguise. The air here tastes of sulfur, open sewers, and cheap, watered-down wine. The streets are narrow, dark canyons where the sun rarely reaches the pavement, crowded with the desperate and the damned. Marcus is given a room that is little more than a closet, a stone cell with a straw mattress that smells of mold and the fluids of 1,000 previous occupants. There are no liars here. There is no poetry. The clients who come here do not want to be charmed. They do not want a conversation about the nature of love. They want meat. The transition destroys the last remnants of Marcus's dissociation. In the villa, he could float above the room, pretending he was an observer of an artistic ritual. Here, the brutality is too immediate, too raw to ignore. The clients are rough hands, soldiers on leave, laborers with calloused palms and breath that smells of garlic and rot. They do not ask his name. They do not care if he smiles. He is a utility, a receptacle for their lust and their rage. The bystander effect of the city is absolute. The screams coming from the lupanar are just part of the background noise of the Subura, ignored by the citizens walking past on their way to the markets. But to truly understand the depth of this abyss, We must look at the ledger. We must become time detectives and examine the accounting of the Roman state, because this misery was not a secret. It was a revenue stream. The Roman government levied a tax on prostitution and the sale of concubines known as the vectigal. Every transaction in that dark room, every coin handed to the brothel keeper, a percentage of it went directly into the imperial treasury. Look closer at the monuments of Rome. Look at the Pantheon, that magnificent temple to all the gods. Its concrete dome, a marvel of engineering that still stands today. We marvel at the oculus, the unblinking eye of heaven. But ask yourself, who paid for the concrete? Who paid for the granite columns floated down the Nile? The gold that built the glory of Rome was washed in the tears of boys like Marcus. The empire was a vampire that fed on its own children to build shrines to its own immortality. The architectural wonders we admire are, in a very literal sense, monuments to systematic abuse. As the months in the Suburra grind on, Marcus's body begins to fail. The human machine is resilient, but it is not indestructible. The wasting disease, likely a combination of tuberculosis, malnutrition, and untreated venereal infections, begins to consume him. It starts with a cough that rattles deep in his chest, a dry, hacking sound that keeps him awake in the brief hours he is allowed to sleep. Then comes the fever, a constant low-grade fire that burns behind his eyes. His skin, once oiled and prized, becomes paper-thin and gray. His bones begin to protrude, sharp angles pressing against the flesh. In a cruel irony, his illness makes him even less valuable, which leads to harsher treatment. The brothel keeper, seeing his investment depreciating, cuts his rations. If you cannot work, he is told, you do not eat. Marcus is caught in a death spiral. He is too sick to earn and too poor to recover. He becomes a ghost haunting the hallways of the brothel, a skeletal figure who is pushed aside by the newer, healthier arrivals. He sees the new boys, fresh from the markets, eyes wide with the same terror he once felt, and he feels a pang of grief that is sharper than the pain in his lungs. He knows their future, he is looking at his own past, and they are looking at their own death. One night, the fever spikes. It is a cold, rainy night in November. The Suburra is flooded with mud. Marcus lies on his straw pallet, shivering violently. His body has finally decided to quit. It is an act of rebellion, the only one he has left. By dying, he is refusing to be used. He is removing himself from the inventory. In his delirium, the walls of the cell seem to dissolve. The stench of the sewer fades, replaced by the scent of olive wood and rain. He is back in Gaul. He is 5 years old. He is sitting on his father's shoulders, watching the sun set over the green hills. He can feel the roughness of his father's tunic, the strength of the hands holding his ankles. He reaches for his belt, his fingers searching for the wooden horse that was burned years ago. In his mind, it is there. It is solid. It is real. The survivor comfort mechanism of the brain grants him this final mercy, a hallucination of home to ease the passage into the dark. Marcus dies just before dawn. There is no family to weep for him. There are no prayers said. His death is discovered by the morning guard, who kicks the body to wake him up and gets no response. The guard does not recoil. He does not show pity. He sighs, annoyed by the inconvenience. He calls for the removal cart. The body is stripped of its rags. Fabric is expensive, after all, and tossed onto a cart piled with other refuse from the district. Marcus is taken outside the city walls to the puticuli, the open pits where the poor and the enslaved are discarded. He is thrown into the earth, his bones mingling with the bones of thousands of others, a mass grave of the empire's unwanted. But the final indignity is not the pit. It is the paperwork. 16 centuries later, archaeologists excavating the ruins of a Roman administrative center will find a wax tablet preserved in the anaerobic mud. It is a ledger from a brothel in the Suburra. The time detective scrapes away the dirt and reads the stylus marks. It is a list of expenses and losses. There, on a line dated to the year 100 AD, is a simple entry: unus puer, mortuus, damnum, one boy, dead, loss. That is Marcus's epitaph. Not a name, not a son. A loss, a write-off, an inventory adjustment. The system that destroyed him did not even grant him the dignity of personhood in death. It simply balanced the books. But the earth remembers what the ledgers tried to erase. Modern forensic anthropology allows us to read the bones found in those pits. We can see the story that the ink ignored. We see the stress fractures in the vertebrae from carrying heavy loads or being forced into unnatural positions. We see the Harris lines on the tibia, the markers of arrested growth caused by periods of severe malnutrition and trauma. We see the teeth, ground down by stress-induced bruxism, the grinding of teeth in sleep from chronic nightmares. And we find something else. In the ruins of the luxury villas, in the drains of the private baths, archaeologists have found surgical instruments, small, delicate bronze clamps, scalpels. These were not for saving lives. They were for modification. Evidence suggests that castration was performed frequently and often clumsily, leaving boys with chronic infections and pain. We find evidence of infibulation, the piercing of the flesh, to prevent sexual activity without the master's permission. The medical instruments were tools of ownership, branding the flesh not with heat, but with steel. The discovery of the ledger and the bones forces us to confront a terrifying reality. The Roman Empire was not a civilization that happened to have slaves. It was a civilization that was defined by slavery. The beauty of its art, the logic of its philosophy, the power of its legions, all of it rested on a bedrock of human suffering that was so normalized it became invisible. The elite did not see Marcus as a victim. They saw him as a resource like timber or marble. They saw his suffering as the natural order of things, the destiny of the weak to serve the strong. As we stand over the excavation site, looking down at the jumbled bones of the peticuli, we are not just looking at history, we are looking at a mirror. Because the logic that put Marcus in that pit, the logic that says some people are objects, that profit justifies exploitation, that the vulnerable exist to feed the powerful, that logic did not die with Rome. It went underground. It changed its language, but it survived. Marcus is dead. His wooden horse is ash. His name is a scratch on a wax tablet. But his story is not over, because the machine that ate him is still hungry. And as we leave the ancient world behind, we must ask ourselves, where are the Marcuses of today? Where are the ledgers being written right now that reduce a human life to a line item of loss? The dust has long since settled over the peticuli. The open pits outside the Esquiline Gate were filled in centuries ago, paved over by the expansion of a city that refuses to die. Today, tourists walk over the ground where Marcus's bones lie, eating gelato and checking their phones, oblivious to the strata of suffering beneath the soles of their shoes. We look at the Colosseum, the Forum, the baths of Caracalla, and we see the triumph of human achievement. We see the marble that Augustus claimed to have left behind. But we do not see the mortar, we do not see the blood and the ash of the wooden horses that bind the stones together. The Roman Empire, for all its philosophy and law, was a machine that required a specific fuel to run, and that fuel was the dehumanization of the vulnerable. When the Western Empire finally collapsed in 476 AD, shattered by the weight of its own corruption and the incursions of the so-called barbarians, the facilities closed. The luxury villas where boys were trained in poetry and silence were abandoned to the vines and the looters. The ledgers were lost to the damp earth. The Lanistas disappeared into the chaos of the Dark Ages. It is tempting to view this as the end of the story, to close the book and say, the nightmare is over. We have evolved. We use the distance of 2,000 years as a shield, telling ourselves that we are the inheritors of Rome's light, but not its darkness. But look closer. Look at the mechanism, not the architecture. The system that destroyed Marcus, the system that turned a child into a commodity, that validated his exploitation through law, that normalized his abuse through culture, did not die with the Caesars. It is a shapeshifter. It went underground. It changed its language. It traded the tunic for the t-shirt, the litter for the black SUV, the papyrus scroll for the encrypted database. But the core dynamic remains terrifiedly, stubbornly unchanged. The belief that money grants the right to own another human being's body. Conservative estimates suggest that over the 5 centuries of Roman dominance, 800,000 young men passed through the machinery of the concubine trade. Today, the International Labor Organization estimates that there are more than 40 million people living in modern slavery. A significant percentage of them are children trafficked for sexual exploitation. The scale has not diminished. It has industrialized. The supply chains that once brought boys from the misty coasts of Britannia to the slave markets of the Forum now stretch across oceans and borders, utilizing the internet to market victims with an efficiency that Katie the overseer could only have dreamed of. We must confront the uncomfortable truth that the psychology of the consumer has not altered. The men who visited the facility to rent Marcus were not monsters in the fairy tale sense. They were senators, generals, poets, men of culture, men of families, men who believed themselves to be virtuous. They were able to compartmentalize their morality because their society gave them permission to do so. They viewed Marcus not as a boy with a father and a history, but as a speaking tool, a luxury good. Today, the consumers of human trafficking operate under the same delusion. They act within the shadows of a parallel economy, protected by wealth and anonymity, convincing themselves that the transaction is consensual or at least inevitable. The banality of evil is not a Roman invention, it is a human condition. The story of Marcus forces us to reevaluate the very definition of civilization. Is civilization the height of your buildings, the reach of your armies, and the complexity of your tax codes? Or is it measured by how you treat the person who has absolutely no power to harm you? By Roman standards, the empire was the pinnacle of human development. By the standard of Marcus's life, it was a finely decorated meat grinder. We are the heirs of Rome. We inherited their law, their language, their calendar, and their architecture, but we also inherited their blind spots. We inherited the ability to look away. When we walk past the homeless youth in our own cities, when we buy products made in sweatshops that operate like modern ergastula, when we ignore the news stories of trafficking rings broken up in our own neighborhoods, we are practicing the same bystander effect that kept the Roman citizens silent as the wagons rolled into the Suburra. We are assuming that it is the natural order of things for the weak to suffer. Archaeology is the science of memory. It digs up what the present wants to forget. The discovery of the ledger in the mud, with its cold entry, "One boy, dead, loss," is a message in a bottle from the past. It is a warning. It tells us that a society can be beautiful, powerful, and wealthy, and still be fundamentally rotten if it builds its prosperity on the backs of the voiceless. It tells us that the golden age was only golden for those standing on top of the pyramid. For those underneath, it was dark, heavy, and suffocating. Marcus died alone on a straw mat, feverish and discarded. He never returned to Gaul. He never saw his father again. The wooden horse was never replaced. His life was a tragedy of unfulfilled potential, a spark extinguished before it could become a flame. But by telling his story, by reconstructing the industrialized vice that consumed him, we deny the system its final victory. The system wanted him to be a statistic, a line item, a loss. By remembering him, we make him a person again. We give him back the name that the ledger tried to erase. The sun sets over the modern city of Rome. The lights of the scooters and the cars stream around the Colosseum like a river of fire. The ruins stand silent, their broken teeth silhouetted against the purple sky. They are beautiful, yes, but they are also gravestones. They mark the resting place of an empire that forgot its own humanity. As we leave this story, do not let the distance of time comfort you. Do not tell yourself that Marcus is just a ghost from a dead world. He is a mirror. He is every child who is bought, sold, and rented today. He is the face behind the statistics. And he is asking us, from the silence of the pit, a question that rings across 2,000 years. You see what they did to me. You see how they legalized it, how they normalized it, how they profited from it. Now, look at your own world and tell me, what has changed? The wooden horse is ash. The boy is dust. But the fire that burned them is still alive. It waits in the dark corners of our cities, in the loopholes of our laws, and in the quiet complicity of our silence. The history of the Roman concubine is not a closed chapter. It is a prologue. And the story is still being written. The only question remaining is whether we will finally have the courage to break the pen.